Okay, so we've looked at the quarterback, the running back, the wide receiver, so naturally, don't you think it's time to look at everyone's favorite position in American football, the tight end? Since day one of the NFL's inception, the tight end has been nothing short of a highlight machine, churning out heart-pounding plays that have left people captivated recently. Nowadays, the tight end is the premier part of every high-octane passing offense, but since this is an evolution video, we gotta go way back and remember a time before the Gronks and Kelce's ruled the land. A time where the tight end was thought of as nothing more than a glorified lineman. So from the 1340s to sometime in the 1940s, the tight end was almost exclusively lined up behind the lineman and wasn't actually called a tight end and just called, you know, an end. Teams would usually leverage their ends back then and have one guy primarily block, where the other, usually a tight end or a flanker, would primarily go out for passes and maybe hit a little chip block along the way. But all it takes for evolution to happen in human life is one small mutation, one little deviation from the regular formula, and the snowball effect begins. And that's exactly what happened in the 1961 NFL Draft when the Chicago Bears drafted tight end Mike Ditka 5th overall. And immediately, Bears owner and coach George Halas had a plan. Halas had a vision, some outlandish idea that he could use a tight end as not only a great open field blocker, but as someone who could spread out the field through the passing game. And remember, back then this was just a foreign concept. So nobody in the NFL saw Mike Ditka's rookie year coming, where Ditka broke the tight end matrix, proving to the rest of the league for the first time ever that a tight end could lead an offense to real success. In the 1961 season, Mike Ditka logged the first ever 1,000-yard season by a tight end, also adding in 56 catches, all while spearheading the Bears to a winning record. And Ditka just kept his dominance going, as through 6 years with the Bears, he caught 316 passes for 4,503 yards, 34 touchdowns, and won the NFL championship in 1963. Now, although his stats may not look as impressive if we compared him to a guy like, I don't know, Travis Kelce from today's era, but there's a ton of factors that go into that. Obviously, the game back then was completely different with so much more emphasis on the run game, and please remember that Mike Ditka is nothing short of a founding father of the tight end, and without him, Travis Kelce would have never been born. And on top of all that, Mike Ditka was a phenomenal blocker, still keeping the essence of the tight end that sticks with the position today, and also, for what it's worth, he was arguably the toughest guy in the league. Which was cool, and although at this time Mike Ditka did effectively create the tight end from nothing, he also unintentionally baked in the tight end's kryptonite, the weakness of every tight end that still plagues the position today, and that is health. Just overall health. Because although Ditka was great for 6 years in Chicago, his numbers severely whittled down by the year, and by the age of 28, Mike Ditka's years as a productive NFL player were cooked. But his impact had already created enough shockwaves around the NFL, so going into the 1963 draft, two massive tight end cornerstones would be drafted, and one of the two, the more important one by a fair amount, being John Mackey. Simply put, John Mackey was just the swollest dude in the field at all times, and torpedoed through defenses as a tight end, something that just 3 years prior was considered unheard of. It turns out when you give a guy who's 6'2", 225 in the 1960s some momentum after catching the ball in the open field, he's pretty hard to tackle, and John Mackey was pretty much the first tight end to add that freak of nature element to the position. I mean, 65% of the man's career touchdowns came from at least 30 yards. And if it were tracked back then, I'm sure this man's yards after catch numbers would just be barbaric. I mean, John Mackey was everything you wanted in a tight end. He blocked perfectly, he ran the ball sometimes, and he caught the ball and ran over people. And he also won an NFL championship just like Mike Ditka. But before we move on to the 1970s, let's talk about that other guy from the draft, Jackie Smith, the most tragic player in NFL history. If we're being honest, Jackie Smith wasn't as good as Ditka or Mackey in their primes, but what Jackie Smith did have over the other guys was longevity. Well, sort of. Although he was able to rack up consistent seasons of over 450 yards, he played until 1978 and is only known for one horrible drop that was the main turning point in his team losing a Super Bowl. And this one drop led to his Hall of Fame career being viewed as nothing more than a laughingstock. So I I feel bad for the man. Someone had to give him his flowers. Now we move on into the 1970s, where, dare I say, the tight end actually plateaued in terms of evolution, and this is the only decade that could be argued that the tight end actually went backwards. Seriously, the tight end pool during the entire 1970s decade is just dead barren, but the best the decade had to offer was by far and away Dave Casper, one of the main targets for the 70s Raiders. He was a great blocker as usual, and was top of the league in receiving yards most years, but that wasn't some contested crown, as he only broke 800 yards in a season once. And just look at these tight end league leaders, like, oh, what? Basically, the only takeaway from this decade is that physical beasts just continue to dominate, like the 6'4", 240 Dave Casper and the 6'6", 250 Russ Francis. So they've proved that John Mackey's formula is going to be a winning one in the future. Anyways, things pick right back up in the 80s, when in football terms, Kellen Winslow Jr. was born in 1979, the most important tight end ever. So Winslow joined the Chargers in the early 80s, and combined with Hall of Fame quarterback Dan Fouts and head coach Don Coryell, the Chargers aired the ball out more than anyone. Now, Kellen Winslow was unlike any tight end before him. As a former basketball player who was 6'5", 251 in his prime, he was used almost 100% in the receiving game, rarely ever blocking. In his best 3 years of his career, Kellen Winslow dominated the position, as he had 265 catches, 3,537 yards, and 27 touchdowns, basically just the definition of consistency. So Kellen Winslow straight up propelled the tight end forward, making up for all of the lack of evolution in the 1970s and much more. So Kellen Winslow really challenged the idea of the tight end around this time. People were starting to realize that athleticism should be valued almost above anything as a tight end. And, maybe there's a lot more value than we thought in effectively just adding another wide receiver to the field. But like the guys before him, Kellen Winslow was cursed with bad health, and the wear and tear of being a tight end caught up to him while he still had more years left in the tank. And there were other guys in the 1980s at his position, like the aforementioned Russ Francis and I guess like Ozzie Newsome, but as you'll see going forward, a theme is going to be one tight end kinda does most of the evolution heavy lifting and the other guys just follow behind him. So, going into the 1990s, if there was one thing the tight end position lacked, it was personality. Nobody was out there running around in their backyard pretending to be a tight end. Everyone wanted to be a receiver. And thus, a problem, one man came to fix it. Shannon Sharpe was drafted way back in the 7th round of the 1990 NFL Draft, and was unlike any tight end the NFL had seen before. See, pretty much every dude we've looked at besides Kellen Winslow has been the same build, around 6'4", 240, and has the ability to put anyone on their ass with a block and catch a good 3rd and 6 play-action pass. But Shannon Sharpe was a different breed. He came into the league at a puny 6'1", 220, and as a 7th round pick by the Broncos, they didn't really know if he would make the team, so the team even decided to use him at wide receiver more than tight end in his early years. However, over time, he built up muscle and got a little bit taller and never became a great blocker, but that was okay, because Shannon Sharpe was a raging psychopath. If anything, Shannon Sharpe showed that as a tight end, if you can find your niche and be really, really good at one thing, then you'll have a place in the league for time to come. So in 7 straight seasons, Shannon Sharpe was one of the main receiving threats on the 90s Denver Broncos, making 7 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pros, and winning 2 Super Bowls in the process. Shannon Sharpe basically just cloned the Kellen Winslow version of the tight end and injected a little, Patrick Beverly into it, and trust me, I'd love to talk about all the insane things Shannon Sharpe has done on and I guess off the field, but there's no time for that. The 90s also had other guys like Ben Coates, but the tight end had still just remained relatively static, and it wasn't until the very near future when the position would completely blossom. Now it's time for the golden era of the tight end. This decade had so many guys that were your normal consistent tight end like a Dallas Clark or Algie Crumpler. But this decade also had players who built on cornerstones of the position with the Kellen Winslow type basketball tight end in Antonio Gates. And you also had the embodiment of longevity with Jason Witten, and of course the guy who unlocked the true potential of a tight end with Tony Gonzalez. Let's start by looking at Antonio Gates, who took Kellen Winslow's basketball style of tight end and took it to the extreme, because he never even played college football. And this wouldn't have been a problem if this weren't like the 1930s, but when you move into the 2000s, my god, how do you get into the NFL without the fundamentals? Anyway, Antonio Gates didn't care and joined the Chargers in 2003 as an undrafted free agent and quickly became the surprising heir to Kellen Winslow's throne. By just his second season, Antonio Gates was already making all-pro teams and was just bullying defenders all around him. He was just bigger and stronger than anyone matched up with him, creating mismatches with linebackers and safeties alike. That vision that George Halas had so long ago just continues to prove to be correct. And we also saw guys like Jason Witten just do normal tight end stuff. He wasn't going to jump off the paper at you. He was a great blocker, caught the ball when you needed to, and was just an overall hard worker and a sneakily quick guy. So while those two guys were excellent, don't get me wrong, but Tony Gonzalez revolutionized the position more than anyone since Kellen Winslow. So after being drafted early in the first round in 1997, the 6'5", 250 Tony Gonzalez took some time to get going, even getting benched early on in his career. But when he got going, holy lord did he get going, because he proved that a tight end didn't just have to be a blocking guy, and that they could actually be the #1 receiving threat on an offense at any given time. And just like Kellen Winslow and Antonio Gates, he had that basketball background, which propelled him to become the main threat on countless offenses throughout his career. Not that the whole basketball thing matters at all, but I thought it was pretty cool. Tony Gonzalez was also, without exaggeration, an Iron Man fueled by pure diesel, because this man made 13 Pro Bowls in 14 straight seasons. And in 270 career regular season games, Tony Gonzalez missed one. Tony Gonzalez missed one career game. So with Tony Gonzalez aging in the 2010s, he now metaphorically gave birth to a whole new wave of hybrid nightmarish tight ends that still infest the league today. So the 2010s had guys like Jason Witten, Antonio Gates, and Tony Gonzalez dominate early on, while their corroding bodies lagged on later in the decade. So this allowed a ton of new faces to come into the league. Rob Gronkowski. Boy, was he good at football. An absolute anomaly of a football player. Gronk came into the NFL at 6'7", 270, and was just a mammoth on the gridiron. Remember the old days when Mike Ditka was considered some impossible matchup for puny linebackers? Well, imagine you're just an average linebacker. You're about 6'2" to 6'3", you spread out wide, and you're looking to see which tight end you're covering, and this man is staring directly into your soul. Rob Gronkowski would be the perfect tight end to draw up on a blueprint, and George Halas would just have a wet dream looking at this man now. His role in the 2010s Patriots dynasty was primarily to catch passes, so with his blocking responsibilities limited, this man was able to pretty easily break well over 1,000 yards every semi-healthy season, as well as at least double-digit touchdowns. If you factor longevity out of tight end statistics, Gronk leads just about all of them, but you know, Gronk got hurt, like, a lot, all the time. But somehow, the other most dominant tight end from the 2010s avoided that one built-in flaw into the position, and he still is dominating the NFL today. It's Travis Kelce. The guy I'm talking about is Travis Kelce. He came into the league at 6'5", 250, and after barely playing his rookie year, he got cooking immediately. From 2016 to 2022, Travis Kelce logged 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons as a tight end, and yes, Travis Kelce was a monster with Alex Smith before Mahomes as well. Just like Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce focuses almost entirely on running a route on every play and barely blocks, becoming the focal point of about every offense he's on. And even this year, Travis Kelce and the Chiefs just might prove that a team can win a Super Bowl with their #1 receiving threat just being a lowly tight end. So also in the 2010s, we had other basketball guys like Jimmy Graham, who seems insignificant now, but he actually played a huge part in a massive evolution in the 2010s. Although it had happened a few sparing times in the past, in the 2010s, we got to see a true quarterback-tight end connection like we've never seen before, as we got to see Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, Drew Brees and Jimmy Graham, and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And these quarterbacks and tight ends know each other so well that we even got things like Kelce Kelce and Mahomes happening, where Kelce doesn't even run a route on most of his plays. He just gets open and Mahomes finds him. Anyways, with all the insanity, we look ahead to the 2020s decade for the tight ends, where things are admittedly a little bit blurry. Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews are, I guess, leading the tight ends into the next decade, but we have players like Kyle Pitts who are just way too young, so I guess we'll have to wait and see who's going to grab the torch from Kelce soon. So from guys like Mike Ditka and John Mackey, Shannon Sharp and Tony Gonzalez, to what we've seen recently in Travis Kelce and Rob Gronkowski, this was the full evolution of the tight end position. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe, because I got a lot of videos on the channel just like this one. If you like this video, then you should watch this video right here on the full history of the evolution of the wide receiver position. It's pretty good, trust me. Anyways, until next time.